Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar, especially those who might be logging into one of these for the first time. Lovely to have you with us. I hope you're keeping warm where you are, and apologies for the quality of my voice this evening. Here in Sale, where some of us are beaming in from, we're on the lands of which the Barakalung clan of the Gunai peoples are the traditional custodians, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. And I'm sure that you would want to just pause and be mindful of the First Nations peoples from where you're joining us, and of what is country for them. And some of you might have been at our reconciliation webinar a couple of weeks ago, and we remind ourselves of our responsibility at this time for that really, really deep listening to our First peoples, and especially in the context of an acting webinar, their wisdom with respect to caring for our land and our waterways, as they've done so magnificently over tens of thousands of years before us. It's a real joy to be introducing two presenters this evening who are Gippsland Anglicans and part of the team. So our wonderful registrar, Richard Connelly, whose ingenuity knows no bounds, as we will soon witness, and as anyone who's used the award-winning vacuum cleaner to clean your gutters at your parish or your church hall will know, an invention that helps keep our insurance bills down, as well as our buildings safe from the effects of climate change. Richard is a member of the acting committee, a founding member, and indeed of the Abbey chapter, and you'll be aware of some overlap between those two bodies. So Richard, thank you for what you're going to share with us tonight. And Richard is joined by Dr. Anne Miller, who is a celebrated GP here in Sale, the dispenser of magnificent herbal remedies in that capacity to ailing bishops who are suffering with man flu. She is a former lay canon of St Paul's Cathedral, where she does just about everything, and also a former member of the Abbey chapter and of acting. And so it's just a real joy, I think, to have two of our own people sharing with us tonight, as we try to keep things very grounded and practical in terms of what we might be able to do in our settings to be active in this space. So welcome to you both especially, and to each and all, and I'll hand you over to our wonderful chair of acting, Jan Down, to lead us forward.
Thanks, Bishop Richard. I'd just like to start with a prayer and then hand over to Richard. So let's pray. This is a prayer partly based on Psalm 104. O Lord our God, you are very great. You are clothed with honour and majesty, wrapped in light as with a garment. You ride on the wings of the wind. You make springs gush forth in the valleys. They flow between the hills, giving drink to every wild animal. From your lofty abode you water the mountains. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. Lord, you created us as one part of a beautiful and delicately balanced world, but we humans have seriously disturbed that balance. We pray for your grace as we seek to restore it. Enlighten us tonight, give us new insights, and show us how to play our part in practical ways in our own homes and communities. To the praise of your name. Amen.
Thank you, Jan. I was hoping that tonight will definitely not be prescriptive, where we'll say this is things that both Anne and myself do around our respective homes are the only way to take action in addressing climate change, but rather to encourage each of us to take steps in the way we are doing. So I'm going to be offering some of the things I do around my place, in taking this issue seriously and believing we need to orient our lives in a way that recognises our impact on the environment, and making sure that the small steps we can take will each collectively make quite a big difference. So I'm going to start off with this short video vignette, the first one on solar power. With the number of subsidies that are available for solar electricity at the moment, many people are putting in solar panels on their roofs. And at the moment it doesn't seem to be cost effective to be putting batteries on, and even then a few years down the track we might be looking at battery powered electric vehicles. So if you're making a decision now about putting solar panels on your roof, if you have the opportunity to give a thought of putting on as many panels as you possibly can, which often may mean putting in a bit more money than is available through the state government solar panel rebates, it could be worth a good investment in the long run. Because one day the power we use for offsetting the cost of electricity in our home could be used for providing electricity at night time with batteries, and then powering our cars down the track. So solar panels is something that went onto our house several years ago. And as I mentioned in that video, we put in as many as we possibly can. And in my travels around the diocese, I keep coming across many churches that have popped panels on their roofs. Painesville last week, up in Omeo, up in the hills, there were solar panels on the rectory and the church. So it's good to see parishes taking action. But I'd like to hear from the group around their experiences with solar panels, some of the reasons why people may have deferred the decision to put them on, or problems, but also encouragements that people have had through solar installations.
We have only recently moved to Poowong in the last 4 years. In Melbourne, we had solar panels on our roof from a very early stage, and the pay-in rate then was quite great, and we didn't ever pay for electricity. We had a family with varying numbers, up to 4 children in the house at any one time. When we moved here, we were very keen to put them on, despite the fact that the pay-in rate now is way lower. We did get government subsidy. There are 2 of us living in this house, and generally speaking, we use less electricity than a 1-person household will use. So because the cost of electricity is high and because the pay-in rate is low, we still do end up paying for electricity, but through the summer, usually not at all, and through the winter, quite minimally, despite having reverse cycle air conditioning as one of our heating methods. I think the important thing with solar panels is the ability to use your electricity during the day when you're generating your own, because we don't have batteries yet, and as Richard said, they're not really viable at this point. So we're lucky because we're retired and we're here during the day, so I can do the washing during the day, we can put the dryer on, we can run the dishwasher, all of those things that a lot of people are forced to do in the evening, but we can do those during the day, and that certainly reduces our power.
In addition to that, when we were in Carnegie in Melbourne, we had trees out the front of the house, and they were a bit of a problem, particularly in the late afternoon, because they were casting shadows over the panels, and that reduces their viability. However, because of the rate at the time, it didn't affect it, but it's something that one would need to consider to keep trees away from the house, so that you've got full-on sunshine onto the panels, all day during the daylight. Yeah.
If I can respond to a couple of those points, I know my washing machine's got a timer setting that if I'm, learned how to use that better, I'd be able to put the load in, close the door, turn the timer on, so it's washing at the time where I'm not in the house. And so our technology has a lot of facilities. There's just a bit of learning for me to do along the way, which haven't embedded that piece yet. And I just wanted to notice that paradox too, because sometimes we want the shade on a west wall or something to cool an aspect of the house, but if it's interfering with the function of your solar panels, you're kind of in a bit of a tension.
I noticed that the conversation in relation to solar panels is changing a little bit, in that lots of the consideration in the past has been to do with feed-in tariffs and the cost effectiveness. And even as I mentioned, it doesn't seem to be cost effective to put in batteries at this point in time. But I think there's a new narrative coming into the discussion now around continuing to use coal-fired power generation actually has a cost on the environment, and people are making decisions to install alternative energy sources as a personal contribution to addressing climate change and their household emissions. So it's encouraging to see that people are acting ethically beyond consideration of back pocket consideration.
I think, Richard, that we have to be careful about who we use as our supplier of electricity, and we need to look carefully at who is encouraging the green energy electricity and who is still tied up in the coal-powered stuff. So where not everyone can afford to put panels on their roof, they can really look at who their energy supplier is and what is a better choice at that level.
We have a house in Merbu, which some of you may have seen on video, but we don't live in it. We rent it out, and we have a little bungalow that we stay in quite often on our days off and that. Anyway, we put solar panels on it a couple of years ago for that precise reason that Richard was saying. Well, Richard and it's Christina, is it? Just we have no say over what the tenants do in terms of their power, but at least we're doing a little something there. And it was a bit of a toss-up, because obviously if we put them on, we plan to retire there. If we waited till then, they'd last longer. But we got the best quality that we could, and we for all sorts of reasons, and we thought, well, at least they're helping somebody else.
And the tenants are happy with the lower power bills.
But you can't claim it on your tax, which is a bit silly, really, because a lot of people rent, and if they encourage landlords to do that, that would actually be very helpful. But I don't know how many landlords actually care about the environment or more about their investment. It's hard to know.
Well, we put solar panels on about 11 years ago, and we haven't paid a bill since, which is really wonderful. It's gradually going down, of course, with the rebates going, with the pay and feed-in tariffs going down, but we've kept enough of a buffer not to be paying at the moment. And I think if you can reduce your use of electricity, which of course you can, you just have to change your behavior. You can make it much more affordable. There are other ways of shading the house rather than having a tree. You can use pergolas and creepers, and have creepers going up the side of the house, or a tree or a bush that only comes up to the roof, which shades the wall really effectively. Unfortunately, our one that did that on one of our rooms fell over in a storm, and we haven't managed to replace it yet. But that's certainly another way of going. Perhaps, whereas Richard's talking about retrofitting, my talk is more about if you're building a new house, which of course is of less general interest, I guess. So when we were thinking of retiring, we decided we would like not to live in the middle of town, and all the ducks lined up at the right time, and we were able to buy bit of land that we liked. We couldn't get hold of the builder for about 1.5 years, but that was actually an advantage because we were able to spend a lot of time on the block, getting to know the land, actually understanding the energy of the land, the lie of it, where the sun came in, at what time of day and at what time of year, where the shade was, the natural shade on the property. Our neighbours to the north had some very, very tall pine trees, which actually shaded the top half of our garden at midwinter. And so we were able to position the house so that it didn't get actually shaded in winter. The prevailing weather is also really important because that actually changes where you put windows. In our block, the prevailing weather is from the west or southwest, and some of it can be very strong, except in summer. And in summer, almost like clockwork, at 1 o'clock, the easterly sea breeze starts. Now, most people in Sale don't notice that, but we're right on the easterly edge of Sale. And it's wonderful. It could be a dreadfully hot day. And about 1 o'clock, we can open the windows on the south side and the ones on the west and the north ones. And it just cools the house down. It's quite amazing. I wouldn't have believed it had I not experienced it. It is amazing. So orientation is absolutely vital if we're going to be building sustainably. So in this area, facing north is critical. At the moment, we do get very cold winters. And so orienting your house so that it receives the most winter sun possible is really important. So when I lie in my bedroom in the morning, I can see where the sun rises. So in midsummer, it rises down there, down to the south. In midwinter, it rises up there to the north. And the arc of the sun during the day is completely different because of the tilt of the earth. So that in midwinter, the lower sun heats the concrete floor right to the back of our living room. In midsummer, the sun stops at the front of the building. It makes a huge difference. So, but I can hear you saying, yeah, but what do you do in summer when it's really hot for a few days? And yes, that is a bit of an issue, and that's when you have to actually manipulate the house, if you like, with fans, changing window. So we've got north-facing windows in our living room. So it's a good idea to actually think about how you use the current house, which rooms are used most, and orient as many of them as you can to the north. So we have floor-to-ceiling windows in our living room. We have 3 windows which you can open at the top, and 2 little windows at the bottom that you can also open. The rest don't open. The ones on the south side open, and the ones on the west side open. The ones on the north side at the ground level, I looked at them for a long time and thought, what's that about? But they're very useful because in the winter, it can get to 27 degrees in our living room when it's 10 degrees outside without any heating. It can get so hot that you really have to open the windows to cool down. And those windows at ground level are perfect for that because the air outside is cool. And so you get cool air coming in, and you open the top windows at the north and it circulates around and cools the place down. It's amazing. So, utilities like garages and bathrooms and laundries and stuff can all be on the south side. because the use of them is really intermittent. They don't have to be on the north. In order to have a comfortable summer temperature, you really do need eaves, because eaves will actually stop the sun coming into the house if they're the correct size. And there are tools online where you can actually work that out. The federal government, I think, put out some a booklet about building sustainably 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago. And it had all those sort of diagrams in, but it's easy enough to find out what's right for your area. Double glazing is, well, I think it's pretty much the standard now for the 5-star rating. I may be wrong about that, but that makes a huge difference to heat transfer and also to noise. We live quite near the RAF. We're actually 5 kilometres as the crow flies from the RAF base. But it's not an issue for us. It's not noisy because of the double glazing.
Well, I do resonate strongly with the double glazing and its quietness, because our young Tom at 11 years old plays the trumpet, and we put him outside the window that's double glazed and we can't hear a thing. It's lovely. But thank you for that. I think we all want to come and live at your place, Anne. We also are in continuing to retrofit and prepare for some food garden and vegetable production, have been looking at in preparation for the hotter and drier summers that have been predicted. We haven't actually seen many in the last few years, but they are coming, they keep promising. So we have been putting a lot of effort into producing water efficient gardens. I'm just going to give you a little tour through some of our wicking beds.
Wicking beds are a great idea to have water-saving production of vegetables. So each of these tanks is lined with builder's plastic. The bottom half is filled with gravel, the top half filled with soil. And then these little pipes going down are used for filling the water up to the height of the gravel. And the water just sits in these pots, wicking up into the plants, giving them the water they need. In the summer, even though it's hot, they really only need watering once every 2 or 3 weeks. It's a really efficient way of cutting down the use of water, keeping the plants well hydrated, and as you can see, thriving.
Wicking beds do appear to be all the rage at the moment, so I was just wondering, have others had success with such garden beds? And you'll see we've adopted 2 different strategies there, one using those white 1,000 litre drums, the IBCs, which we cut in half and become a very easy to and quick to make wicking bed, and that old water tank that we used to use for storing firewood in, and someone came by and said, why don't you turn it on the right way up and cut them into 3 lengths and turn them into garden beds. So many years ago we have done that, and we've had many seasons of production from them.
Just my experience of wicking beds was that I tried to make one out of a polystyrene box that I'd got somewhere or other, and it took me 3 goes before I got it to actually work. One failure after another, but I got there in the end, and it was really good for growing basil, because basil likes lots of water, and it was constantly topped up with, it just kept on going, so that was great.
So we made a whole lot of wooden wicking beds, boxes, and one of the main advantages of those is that you don't have to bend over. If you want to dig, it's with a little fork standing up, which at our age is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, just another thought about the business with the water and so on, is installing water tanks rather than having the water just run straight out through the gutters. We've got a couple in here, and also at the local community garden at All Saints, we've got 2 tanks in there, which supply us with the water now that we need for the gardens. And that, I think that's quite helpful. Just a little addition to what Anne was saying before, and everything she said, I completely endorse what she was saying. What the government did was through the CSIRO, they produced a book about house construction in Australia, and they divided up Australia into different regions, and they came up with ideal housing construction for each of those regions in Australia. Certainly we're covered here in Gippsland area with that. So it's well worth having a look at this book. I think from memory it's about $30. You can buy it online through the CSIRO. And it covers all sorts of things, not only the house orientation, but how you plant around the house and this kind of thing.
Now, I know Sue and Ross, you do lots of gardening away from your primary home, up on your other home block, which is fairly, water is a scarce commodity up there. How have you adapted your garden for water?
Okay, well, first we do have some IBC wicking beds, and I'd have to say they haven't been a brilliant success. Possibly because we're only up there once a week, sometimes once a fortnight, and I find better success with egg ground. Okay, so first off, I'll say I start seedlings by getting them barbecue trays, which you can buy at Bunnings. They are aluminium, but at the end of their life, it's recyclable. And then you put water in those, and then you fill the punnets with your seed raising mix or your compost and mix or whatever, and they will grow in the greenhouse, but usually quite well with the water wicking up into those. And then we plant them out in the soil. So what we've done is we've experimented with lots of different types of mulch, because the soil has its own water supply. And we forget that sometimes, there is water in the soil. It's not just what we put on top of it.
Perhaps we could talk about cooling. So to achieve cooling in our house, we use fans and manipulate the windows, as I was saying before. The air on the shaded side of the house is always a lot cooler than the air on the north side in summer. And if your house is built on stumps, which ours is not, you can actually have a sealable vent in the floor on the south side of the main room to actually ventilate cool air through the house. And that works really well. You can get a small fan to actually increase that. But it's really important that you can actually seal it off, because you don't want that in the winter, obviously. You need to open a high window on the north side to assist in the ventilation there. Insulation is absolutely vital. I'm sure we've all lived in rentals at some time which had no insulation in the roofs and the walls. It makes a phenomenal difference. If you're building a new house, you need to talk to the builder about the air leakage rating and tighten it up if it's not tight enough. Our builder said that our air leakage rating was the tightest he'd ever done, and it would be a very tight house, which it is. It's really great. I have to confess that we have actually installed a split system, trying not to use the gas heating. We can't at the moment because it's broken, but we don't have to use it very often. And the air conditioning was really because the grandchildren were coming to stay at the hottest time of the year, and their parents were a bit anxious about it. We don't use it a great deal, but we do use it occasionally now. particularly as we've got older. So excluding drafts is really important for both winter and summer. And that can be done obviously with design, but also you can get sticky foam that you can put down the side of doors and windows, which will help. We haven't talked about solar hot water, and I think that's something that people say, oh, is it worth doing? Very definitely worth doing. Through the winter, we sometimes have to boost it, but particularly as it's been quite cold at night this winter, it's been boosted fairly regularly. You can now get electrical instant hot water systems that you can put onto solar hot water. Now, there's been a rush to electrify. That's fine, but I think it's not right to be throwing out your gas appliances just because, but wait until they actually start to fail, and then replace them as you can. I think that's the sensible way to go from my point of view.
Right. I'll just feed in on one of your comments around the solar hot water. Our only source of heating in the house is through wood fire, and we have built a wetback, which is a water pipe running through the firebox. And so when our wood fire is on, because it's winter and it's cold, it's also heating up the water as well at the time when there's generally not as much sun as during the summertime. So that's little design things that you can include in the house to make it more energy efficient. So you fired up my passion for compost, and so let me show you a little vignette about my efforts in the compost realm.
Richard, while you prepare that, a while ago I used to live in it was one of the 1952 public housing houses. It was a weatherboard. It was all made of solid hardwood, crazy ideas by today's building standards. But one of the most delightful bits of the house, you reminded me, Anne, when you spoke about moving air and the cool air, was the pantry. Was a tall pantry, and it sat right in the centre of the kitchen. And I found in the floor of the pantry was drill holes, a little mesh of drill holes. I had a mesh across to keep any rodents out. And then it was a slatted shelf pantry all the way to the ceiling, and another mesh like whole panel through to the ceiling. So it would just naturally circulate cooler air from under the house through the pantry to the hotter roof, and the air would rise through. And it just made so much sense. It just made so much sense to keep what was in the pantry cool just from the cool air underneath.
As much as we can, everything in this garden is part of a circular garden economy. Our waste produce from the kitchen gets put into either chicken scraps or into our compost bin, produced to compost over the course of a year, and then it's put back into our veggie patches to grow our veggies, which head into the kitchen. So again, it's a circular. We don't throw out any green waste from this property. It's all any waste, prunings are mulched, turned back into garden beds, turned into compost, building up the quality of the soils. Every little thing we can do to conserve the nutrients that the garden produces and to put back into the quality of the soils that give us good, healthy, organic produce. So this is where this year's leaves go. And these leaves are last year's, and they've just been sitting here. They haven't needed any work, and they're beginning to break down, turning into compost. And this is the leaf matter from 3 or 4 years now. It's all broken down, beginning to get full of worms, and really good soil for growing vegetables. It's almost like a peat moss. Again, not much to see in winter, as most of these beds are fallow, but this here should be enough for a year's supply of garlic for our family, getting ready for picking in spring.
Thanks, Richard. It's really good to see such a lot of compost.
I'm curious, just to come back to Paul, you had a comment or a question?
Very much. My brother-in-law, Christina's brother, is also named called Paul, so it's a bit of a hassle at times. But he's a building inspector, and one of the things that he said to us when we moved into this house in Poowong was to go around all the windows, inside and out, but it didn't need it on the inside and the end, but at the outside, to silicone around all the windows. It stops drafts coming in through the windows, and I guess that's the sort of thing that would go with Anne in what she's been talking about. But just going on with the business now about the composting, we had an old, it was built in 1900, the original house we lived in Carnegie, and it had a couple of big trees in the front. And what I used to do every year in the first week in July was run the lawnmower over all the leaves and just put them straight back into the garden beds. And it's not a true form of composting, but it did actually build up the soil over a period of years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We had an amazing hot compost going when we were in our old place, and Michael had the time to do it then. But it did take a lot of work to do a hot compost. Theoretically, you really need to turn it every 3 days or something. But we've got a kind of a compromise, not cold and not hot compost going here, where we build up the layers in our compost bin with our veggie scraps, but adding a lot of sugarcane or shredded paper, the carbon side of the equation. The nitrogen is the veggie scraps, and the carbon is all the dry things. We add a lot more of that than we do of the veggie scraps, and build it up in layers and water it well. And although we don't have to turn it, and we don't have to create one big lot of compost all at once the way we used to do, it is working a lot better than just putting veggie scraps or in the compost bin. It cooks a lot faster. So it's a kind of a lukewarm, warmish compost.
Has anyone had any luck with the tumble compost bins? I've never tried one, but has anyone tried one and found them work or not?
I heard someone say the other day that they have. I've never done it myself, but I have heard some people find them good.
We've got two different sorts of tumbling ones. They seem to take a bit longer, and if you're not careful, you can get balls of stuff, which gets you hard and dry. They're quite hard to water, and I wouldn't recommend them really. Yeah.
I like the fact that I do think you want to have worms able to get in there at some point in the process. I mean, if you're doing a hot compost, you don't have worms until it's finished and it's starting to cool down, and then the worms come up. But yeah.
My name's Ewan. I've had good success with a compost bin. Purchased some worms at Bunnings, just a small quantity. And Bunnings also have a giant's corkscrew for about $10 or $12. And you just wind it down and then pull it out, and that turns it. And I turn it at least once a week. And that system produces compost surprisingly quickly. And your comment about it's in between warm and cold, I think my bin's somewhere in between as well.
What I'm talking about is rubbish. But maybe a lot of what I'm talking about is rubbish. But in some ways, our sustainability on our property begins here at the rubbish bin. We've been able to reduce our weekly rubbish that goes down to landfill for a family of 4 down to a packet of about this big. How do we do it? All our recycling goes into here. We keep and go to the effort of returning our rubbish clothing back to recyclable companies. We often do trips to the tip with metals and other products that can't be recycled through our bin system. All of our kitchen scraps end up being turned back into compost. Now, I know a year ago the soft plastic recycling that you used to be able to do at the supermarket, that whole system crashed. But when they made the announcement, they said it was only a temporary announcement, that they weren't going to be conducting any more soft plastic recycling. Well, it's been 12 months, and if you've got space in a shed, there's no harm in keeping that soft plastic, putting it in a large bag and just storing it, because one day, it's hopefully there will be the capacity to continue with our soft plastics recycling, and that has been a big contributor to reducing our amount of rubbish that does go to landfill. The amount of rubbish that goes to landfill is one of the greatest contributors that households make to climate change emissions, and so reducing as much as you possibly can has a big impact on our household climate emissions.
But recycling seems to be something that the nation has adopted fairly strongly and quickly through our recycling bins. But there's also many reports that Australia does fall behind many of our, especially northern neighbours in Europe, around the levels of recycling. What do other people do with their recycling around that?
I think you can actually recycle in your compost or in your garden. You can actually put a lot of cotton things. So you can put them underneath the mulch. So I've got quite a large ornamental garden too. So I put old jeans and towels and things that have had their go at being rags, or I've chopped them up and made something else useful out of the useful bits. You do have to be careful because wombats will pull them up, because wombats like going through your mulch, but mostly they go down. And if your jeans have, say, a little bit of elastane in it, well, it doesn't seem to matter. And I started doing this, I don't know, 30 years ago, because we took, up at Merboo, we took all the carpets out and we put hard flooring in for, those of us with asthma would understand this. Anyway, I used, all the carpets went down under the garden, and then we put mulch on them. And I haven't had a piece of, it took probably 20 years for some of the acrylic ones to break down, but they did break down. Now, I'm not doing it where I'm growing things, but I am doing it there. And the putting down your cotton T-shirts isn't going to hurt anybody. So, yeah, you can throw out a lot of clothes like that. But use them as rags. One thing that surprises me is that, our grandmothers didn't they? Your singlet fell apart, so you chopped off the strappy bits and you used it as a rag. Nowadays, people go out and they buy plastic things to wipe up their spills, and it just causes microplastic problems. So, yeah, t-shirts are fantastic.
Yep, we've been doing that for years. Our children didn't like it very much sometimes.
And there's a big plug as well for our diocesan op shops, because recycling also has a role in considering what we purchase. And so recycling, reusing clothes that have been enjoyed by someone else, and then us giving them a second life, reduces the amount of raw materials that go into our clothing production. So thank you to our op shops that make a big contribution.
Yeah, so true. Now, Libby, did you want to do a quick website tour, or are we out of time?
If I may, just if I can take 90 seconds, I realise we're at time, a little bit over, but I think I'm sharing. Yes. Are you looking at the website with me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. So from our homepage, oh, sorry, it's not our homepage, that's a different page. So from our homepage, I have to move a menu out of my line of sight. We've got our Acting on Climate tab here, and we really invite you to come and take a look at the Gippsland Anglicans website. It might be a place that you haven't been to yet or very often, and we try to keep it pretty dynamic with information. So this Acting on Climate is where the group who are bringing this conversation forward cataloguing what we're doing. So if you want to see what was decided at Synod, at Gippsland Synod, you can come and take a look at the motion there and the history of that, and why is it that we're talking about this as a diocese. You can find out more about the group itself, the acting working group that sort of talks and makes decisions about what topics to talk about and how we reach out to the broader diocese and members of it. There's some other resources towards zeros about how organisations like a parish can reduce or examine its energy usage and then keep a track of that and manage it better. So reducing energy usage makes things a little bit cheaper usually, but it also has that environmental effect of not requiring so much energy in the first place. Season of Creation, this is an annual time of awareness of our environment and our impact on, it's global, but our impact on the environment. So keep an eye out for that in September. So there'll be lots coming up about Season of Creation fairly soon. Some views on climate change. A survey was done about 12 or so months ago with Gippsland Anglicans, and the results of that survey are shared with you there. But I really wanted to bring your attention to this tab here, this climate action and links and articles. And this is, well, if you spent your time going through everything in this link, you'll be here for a little while. But it's absolutely not the be-all and end-all, but it's an excellent place to begin that relates with resources and links and recommended publications that relate to the Gippsland Synod motion that was adopted. So if you're interested to understand more deeply theology of creation, we've got some books and topics that you can get your hands on and have a read. These blue bars here are all links. They'll take you to other places. You can hear directly from the Archbishop of Canterbury at the Lambeth Conference and the different addresses he gave. Various, I'll let you read them. I'm not going to take you right through every piece. Practical actions in homes and parishes. So things to inspire you to keep doing what you're doing. And I want to thank the people at tonight's webinar for already being motivated on this topic and doing things already. You're a really important voice in our parishes to speak and advocate for climate action and for parishes to help take steps towards climate action efforts. So, come here, come and take a look and use any of this. There's some really nice little videos. So even sharing a video is a great way to do it. You might want to do this or put it forward at a congregational meeting or one Sunday after service. There might be something that you can say, hey, let's put up the website and take a look. prayer and liturgical resources, particularly as we come towards season of creation, but prayer all the time. We really need to turn our minds to our creation and a healthy environment and a sustainable environment. So there's resources there. There's more from our own bishop. Thank you, Bishop Richard, and others. There's links and things to download. Some starting point ideas. What can you do today at home? So if you're thinking about home, I hope you've all taken advantage of the Power Saving Bonus program. You can get $250 just for comparing bills. It ends fairly soon, so take a look. Just go to the link, and some other tips. I won't go through them again, but again, it's just to really keep you inspired to do a little bit more. We're still working on some useful, meaningful ideas for parishes, so that's coming next. And if you want to just refine if you've missed any of our other webinars, I've shortcutted them here, so you can just click and watch them from here. All these other topics that have been brought to you by this acting group. So jump on the Gippsland Anglicans website, really easy to find on the Acting on Climate tab. Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Libby. And we really do need to stop, so we've gone over time tonight. But thanks very much to Anne and to Richard for the things that you've prepared for us tonight and shared with us. Yes. And thanks to everyone who has attended as well. And we'll leave you with that. Thank you, everyone.
Now, lots of the material we've looked at tonight is really applicable to those who have their own properties, who own their own homes. And often some of the things we've been talking about around retrofitting the house, installing solar panels, even developing garden beds, can be beyond the reach of people who are renting their properties. That doesn't mean that there aren't adjustments we can make to our lifestyles to make our homes more energy efficient, such as putting gap sealers and looking at ways of insulating the house from heat loss or retaining the heat and or the cool, irrespective, depending on the weather and outside. But also there are some things that you can do as gardens, even in rental accommodation. So this next little video I'd like to share is something that is easily replicable in rental situations. What I'm about to show you is a gutter grow vegetable garden, and it actually doesn't have any screws in it. All it needs to be done is tipped upside down, the water tipped out, and it can be moved from property to property. So it's entirely suitable for people who are renting properties. Let's have a look.
Winter's not the best time to show off a veggie garden, but these gutter grow pots are probably the most efficient way, water efficient way you can grow vegetables. These pots sit in a tub of water and they capillary action water up to provide the plant with just as much water as it needs. So these pots sit in here all year round, providing enough water to grow the plants.
So where do you find 20 or 30 5-litre yogurt tubs? Well, I found them by knocking on the kitchen door of our local Indian restaurant, and they had a garage full of them at home, and they said, help yourself, they're free. Now, ideas for garden beds like this and wicking beds, other strategies that we can use around the home. A frequent source of information I have is on YouTube. The wisdom of Dr. Google, internet searching it is a great way of coming up with ideas around living more sustainably.